We're the ones that should be on TV.
Already, the actors were demanding their own Bulk and Skull spin-off in the 13th episode of the all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers. So here we are at the conclusion of the 6th Ranger storyline. Up until now, corresponding episodes have mostly stayed in sync with each other. However, as we approach the ending, we see another wonderful case of Power Rangers taking 2 episodes of Zyuranger and combining them into one. Putting the results aside for now, this combination is far more understandable than past attempts. There are simply too many elements incompatible with the story Power Rangers had told up until now, or incompatible with future stories they wanted to tell. Most of the lost footage is from the first episode of the pairing, and we will see why momentarily. Green with Evil Part 5 pushes things forward in a fairly predictable way. Tommy is given his own Zord, the Dragon Zord, which causes massive destruction in Angel Grove. This leads to a final confrontation wherein Megazord defeats Dragon Zord, Jason defeats Tommy, the Sword of Darkness is destroyed, and Tommy joins the Power Rangers. That's why I will say this does function as a competent adaptation. All of these things also happen in the 2 Zyuranger episodes. Burai is given his own guardian beast, Dragon Caesar, which causes massive destruction in Japan. This leads to a final confrontation wherein Daijujin defeats Dragon Caesar, Geki defeats Burai, Hellfried is destroyed, and Burai joins the Zyurangers. Kind of. So this is not like teamwork or switching places where the original plot is entirely discarded and the remaining footage is shoved into something that barely makes sense. These episodes are pretty much the same thing as far as its shared elements. The main difference is that many other things also happen in these 2 Zyuranger episodes. Power Rangers essentially cuts out everything it doesn't need, while mostly keeping intact everything it does, which is why this doesn't feel rushed. I suppose the first example of this is the party scene. The villainess and her henchmen celebrate the apparent destruction of their enemies. In Power Rangers, this functions entirely how it looks on the surface. Bad guys having a party. However, they have to cut before a certain point because this scene is about far more in Zyuranger. Before their victory is even settled in, Burai crashes the party to make good on his betrayal. It does not end well for him and he falls back down to Earth. Obviously, with Burai visible, a lot of this footage wouldn't have been usable anyway, but it also has to be cut because do you really think this guy is going to be staging any rebellions against Rita? As I've said many times, there's a power dynamic in Zyuranger that simply doesn't exist in Power Rangers. Burai's allegiances are ever-changing, Tommy's allegiance is static. And since most of the Guardian Beast's Great Riot revolves around Burai's experiences in a post-Bandora world, you can see one of the obvious reasons why Power Rangers couldn't use much of this. It is a shame this had to be cut as it portrays Bandora as a force to be reckoned with. Given Rita's somewhat comedic reputation, this footage would have done wonders to make her more threatening. That said, there is no reason Power Rangers couldn't have kept these hilarious shots of golems as waiters or golems as trumpeters. Come on! This is a silly scene of a villain party. You're allowed to have fun, stop cutting out all the best stuff. And don't even try to tell me this doesn't fit the tone of Power Rangers. I distinctly remember the villains in Season 3 taking over the juice bar and throwing a ridiculous shindig. This would fit in just fine. Anyway, Burai is not alone for long, which brings us to the even larger plot thread Power Rangers cuts around. He is intercepted in the forest by Clotho, the Spirit of Life, who drags him to the Timeless Room. While she doesn't explain why, she informs Burai that he only has 30 hours to live. His life essence is tied to this candle, which continually burns down every moment he's outside of the room. This is pretty smart because now that Burai's tenure as a villain is about to end, the show is establishing a new motivation and character conflict to replace the old ones. Now he has to figure out a way to keep from dying. I'm not going to get too deep into this now since it's really just being set up for future use. I can imagine, though, this is the kind of thing to give the MMPR writers ulcers because this idea defines how Burai is used for the rest of the series. Its complete absence in Power Rangers forces the writers to write around it in basically every episode. I don't think it's much of a shock to assume that Power Rangers never seriously considered killing Tommy off. I don't even think it's too unreasonable to believe they wouldn't want to tie him down to a possibility where his life was continually at stake, even if the outcome ended up being averted. And the candle idea will be adapted in some capacity, but only at the last possible moment. Again, this is all stuff for later. While I do think Zyuranger introduces more gravitas here that its counterpart is lacking, Power Rangers doesn't noticeably suffer at this moment for its absence, and I can totally understand why they didn't use any of this. To replace it, to show that Tommy still exists in this story, we get a scene where Kimberly once again confronts Tommy at the youth center. Yeah, while his Japanese counterpart is staging rebellions and learning of his quickly approaching mortality, Tommy is still working out. Poor guy wasn't even invited to the party. But he's still filled to the brim with cheesy threats and glowing eyes of evil.
You should also know that you and the other Power Rangers will soon be destroyed.
Even though the cat's out of the bag, neither one actually does anything to the other or picks a fight, as cool as that would have been. I guess it wouldn't be sporting. Since the whole death plot has little relevance in this particular storyline, it can be cut fairly seamlessly. However, there is one aspect that has to be accounted for. In Zyuranger, it is Clotho who gives Burai the Zyusoken, the flute dagger that allows him to summon Dragon Caesar, his own guardian beast. Yeah, that's about right. Tell him he can't leave the room without dying, and then immediately tempt him out of the room with a new toy. And Burai uses this new toy to lay claim to the world. Obviously, Green with Evil is not going to abandon the Dragon Zord, so they simplify the whole thing by having Rita summon it. They just mix a few shots of various villain footage to get across the idea that this is Rita's doing. Tommy has the Dragon Dagger with no real explanation, but it's easy to assume it's from Rita too. Quite frankly, it always seemed weird to me that the Zyusoken not only controls the Guardian Beast, but also possesses the completely unrelated function of taking Burai out of the Timeless Room. That feels a bit convenient and sloppy to me. Since Rita has been responsible for everything else, it doesn't really feel out of place to give all of this to her. Once again, the cuts are pretty seamless. However, the cuts continue. Dragon Zord rampages what appears to be the abandoned building district of Angel Grove. That's not the case in Zyuranger, where we see many examples of the human cost. Power Rangers couldn't have used this because of all the Japanese actors. They clearly didn't reshoot any of this, probably a combination of realistic violence and a lack of budget. However, it's a shame because this is where Geki resolves his character conflict. It's at this moment, seeing the devastation his brother is causing, that finally convinces Geki to fight back. It doesn't matter if Burai is his brother, justice is Geki's true love, and he will fight for justice. To its credit, Power Rangers doesn't entirely abandon the idea of the lead character drawing a line in the sand. With their Zords gone, the other Power Rangers are about ready to throw in the towel. But upon learning the Green Ranger's identity, Jason declares they must continue because they have to save Tommy. I'm not going to say it's as good, but it is interesting that they pretty much come to the exact opposite conclusions to motivate them to win. Burai must be stopped, Tommy must be saved. You won't believe it, but there is even more that must be cut out, proving that the Guardian Beast's Great Riot was written specifically to make the Power Rangers writers miserable. Bondora freaks out when Dragon Caesar shows up because now it seems as though Burai has become real competition for her taking over the world. To stop him, she sends down Grifazar and Lamy, so the first episode concludes with the bad guys fighting each other, while the Zyurangers can do nothing but watch in horror. It's an amazing turning of the screw. Zyuranger continues to raise the stakes, up the drama, change the configurations until we get this surreal situation of two former allied villainous factions duking it out over who gets to destroy the world. The frustrating thing is that none of this footage can be used in Power Rangers, even though robot and monster footage is usually ripe for the taking. Rita is the one who summoned the Dragon Zord in the first place. There's no logical reason why Goldar and Scorpina should be attacking Rita's Dragon Zord. We finally get the giant pile-up here where all of the alterations Power Rangers has made to this story are crashing down on them. Good thing it doesn't last very long. That's because in the second half, the giant robots come back. Alpha has finally located Zordon, and because of that... Zords? Okay, that makes no sense. I'm sure this is something Power Rangers skimmed over to fit 2 episodes into one. Let's see what the original solution was. Barza says the magma is full of Gaiatron, so Daijujin's defeat actually healed it. Okay, so they both suck. I'm not even sure which version sucks worse. Is it worse to have a bad explanation or no explanation at all? Either way, after the shock and drama of losing the robots, neither resurrection feels earned. It's so rushed and nonsensical no matter which version you're watching. Power Rangers does get to recontextualize some footage though. The Zyurangers Dino Bucklers glow, which emit colored beams of light, taking away their powers, but using them to help revive the Guardian Beasts? I think? Whatever it does, Power Rangers figured those colored beams look enough like teleportation, so they just say the Power Rangers are teleported into the Zords. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. Also, Jason says that the fact that their morphers are glowing means that Zordon is back. I'm not sure why it would mean that, or how he knows that, but he knows that. If either series has any clear advantage, Zyuranger at least takes the time to appreciate the return of the Guardian Beasts. They appear in the heavens, accompanied by an angelic choir. Their return is stupid, but you'd almost forget that given how much emotion it carries. In Power Rangers, the characters are just teleported into the Zords, so we can fight, fight, fight immediately. Apparently, Zyuranger has decided that, in the future, the Power Rangers writers will have suffered enough. Therefore, we don't get an awesome moment where the Zyurangers and Bandora have to join forces to stop Burai. Instead, Bandora recognizes a fight on 2 different fronts, and she immediately recalls Grifazar and Lamy. That allows Power Rangers to seamlessly cut all of that villain fighting and skip straight from Dragonzord's initial rampage to the final battle between good and evil. And while not nearly as much is cut after this point, the content is shifted around quite a bit. In Zyuranger we get 2 parallel battles. In a clear departure from how Power Rangers reuses the teleporting footage, the Guardian Beasts actually refuse to let the Zyurangers in. Instead, the Tyrannosaurus fights Dragon Caesar one-on-one, while Geki and Burai do the same thing. Obviously that can't happen in Power Rangers, so they're instead re-edited into 2 sequential fights. Throwing in footage from elsewhere, they make it appear the robot fight is controlled by the human pilots. And once Dragonzord is defeated, well, this happens.
Give it up, Tommy! No way!
Given how Power Rangers had to do ADR for every episode, I don't understand why they couldn't have gotten Jason David Frank to record that line instead of someone who is very obviously not him. Anyway, once Dragonzord is defeated, Jason and Tommy start fighting in person. Pulling these 2 fights apart does work pretty seamlessly, I gotta give them credit for that. Once Burai and Tommy are defeated, the footage diverges one more time. Since the characters are untransformed, these conclusions obviously have to use version-exclusive footage. In Green with Evil, Jason shoots the Sword of Darkness, or as Zack calls it,
You destroyed the power sword!
how many power swords does this show have? This breaks the spell on Tommy, who joins the team at Jason's insistence. I guess it's okay, because Zordon says it's fulfilling some kind of a prophecy so that this can all sound important. Then we jump back into Zyuranger footage so they can all do some epic posing. Afterwards, they meet back at the command center and put their hands together. Teamwork! But not the episode teamwork, that sucks. Since Burai doesn't magically stop being evil, the Zyuranger version is quite different. Not entirely different, since Burai still switches allegiances pretty quickly, but still, there is a bit more to it here. Daijujin steps in and starts beating up on Dragon Caesar, and the team is all, geez, he's acting like kind of a dick, are we sure we're the good guys? And then Daijujin commands Geki to kill Burai, at which the team is all, geez, he's acting like kind of a dick, are we sure we're the good guys? Geki refuses to kill Burai, but allows Burai to kill him. However, Burai ultimately can't do it, and his magic tears destroy the sword. Then Daijujin declares Burai good, they celebrate with epic posing, and Daijujin gives a tutorial on the new robot configurations they can use. Burai disappears back to his room, afraid to expend his life any further. Burai and Tommy have joined up with the good guys, which brings this storyline to a close. Let's go ahead and choose a winner for this last pairing. For story, I want to credit Power Rangers for piecing together a finale that makes sense. They don't have a good track record when it comes to condensing episodes. Despite cutting out a lot of material, the resulting episode works as an episode with very few hiccups. That said, its primary conflict boils down to destroy the sword, and I don't even know how Jason knows that. Zordon says it to Alpha, and then Jason awkwardly exposits it to Tommy.
Sorry it has to be like this, but Zordon says I've got to destroy your sword to save you.
Sorry it has to be this way? When paired side by side with the life or death stakes found in Zyuranger, this falls a little flat. Geki witnesses death and destruction, feels guilty for it, and works to atone for it. The best Power Rangers can cobble together is concern for the sword? On top of that, Zyuranger features Burai and Bandura's split. It has their infighting, it has Burai's realization of his mortality. Again, I'm not saying Power Rangers does a bad job here, but I don't think anyone can fault me for giving story to Zyuranger. Characters gets a similar rundown. It's not nothing, but there's just not much happening on this front in Green with Evil. Kimberly gets to confront Tommy one last time, Jason gets a few moments to pull the team together. We still come out of this not knowing anything about Tommy. Meanwhile, as I just said, Geki goes through a character journey. So does Burai. His admission that he projected hate onto his brother because there was no one else alive to blame is the closest we ever get to a believable motivation for the character. Again, it's not even really a contest. Zyuranger wins. For action, most of it is the same, but Power Rangers still has to cut out a lot of it, including the wonderful villain fight, the untransformed sword fight, and the human cost of Dragon Caesar's rampage. Zyuranger wins this category and gets a clean sweep. However, let's continue. When I started this storyline, I said at the end I would choose an overall winner. Obviously, Zyuranger has won 3 individual matchups, while Power Rangers has only won 2, so Zyuranger has a clear lead. That's not what I mean though, I want to examine all of these episodes from an overall standpoint. Coming into this, I thought it was going to be easy. I thought Zyuranger had this in the bag. I remembered Power Rangers meandering a lot, and I'd forgotten or hadn't noticed all the faults Zyuranger had. So the race is actually quite a bit closer than I'd given it credit for. For story, Zyuranger certainly has the upper hand by the end, but its first half is not nearly as impressive as I remembered. Its setup is full of contrivances. Certain elements are either not capitalized on or dropped entirely, existing simply to move the plot forward and discarded when no longer necessary. Power Rangers delivers a much stronger opening, however, because it streamlines so much and refuses to adapt more difficult subjects, by the end it's spinning its wheels, repeating plot points, having long since expended its own narrative. They're almost opposites. One excels at the beginning, the other excels at the end. So I guess for story, I'm going to give it a tie. For characters, these are again almost opposite beasts. In Power Rangers, everybody gets something to work with. The team is split up far more than usual, allowing each member some kind of a role or area of expertise. Kimberly has her crush on Tommy, Zach serves as Kimberly's emotional support and gets to lead a little bit, Billy does the tech stuff, Trini kinda helps with that, and Jason keeps the team together in addition to having his solo dance with danger. But at the same time, Green with Evil is far more about the ongoing threat of Tommy than it is a dedicated character piece. In Zyuranger, the other 4 Zyurangers don't really have anything to do at all. They have far less than their American counterparts, but Geki and Burai have a lot more. It's far more character-focused, but on specific characters. That's not really bad in either direction. They're just different. It's hard to deny, though, that a villain with motivation, as overwrought and forced as it can sometimes be, is an improvement over a villain we learn absolutely nothing about who has no agency. I have to give this one to Zyuranger. Finally, for action, both do a good job. Power Rangers does cut a lot of action scenes down or altogether out, but they really flex their creative muscles adding new fight scenes. They do a good job sometimes of recontextualizing or shifting the order of action scenes. Ultimately, both versions have exactly what they need to complement their respective stories and characters, so I'm also going to give this one a tie. That means that overall, Zyuranger wins, but just barely. For all their flaws, and there are many, these are both fun and exciting shakeups of the status quo that succeed in stimulating the imaginations of their target audiences. That Power Rangers is able to jump into the deep end of serialized storytelling for children after going out of their way to avoid it up until now is certainly commendable. It's not my favorite part of either series, but it's up there. So that's it. With a 6th Ranger in tow, episodes return to normal, but with a new dynamic and new toys. Obviously, we will continue to see which show does better. Thank you for watching. Get to see videos like this a week early by supporting the channel on Patreon. I definitely hope to see you in the future. I mean, not too far in the future. I put out a video every other Monday, so hopefully I won't stray too far from your thoughts. Dragon Ball Dissection is up next, so I hope you'll join me for that. If not, I'll see you next time!